Welcome, everybody. I'd like to thank everybody here for attending our evening's program. We're very excited. I know you're going to certainly enjoy the message that our special guest, Linda Logan, has, and we appreciate Linda's commitment to Ohio Dominican and for her taking the time to join us and share her experiences in her career in sport, as well as where Columbus is going as a sports city. So again, let's give Linda a big round of applause for joining us this evening. I'd like to introduce a handful of folks that are in the room tonight. Of course, tonight's program is sponsored by our Master of Science in Sport Management program. So we certainly have many of our current students here, as well as some undergraduate students as well that are looking at the program, as well as some special guests from other undergraduate institutions or from the workforce that are looking at pursuing their master's degree. Introducing some folks tonight, we have a couple members of our Board of Advisors. We have Mr. Chad Schroeder from IMG College, and we have Danielle Galoni from Carpenter, Lips, and Leland, who is also an adjunct professor for us. Our athletic department at Ohio Dominican is represented as well. We've got our athletic director, Mr. Jeff Blair, and his assistant athletic director, Scott Miles. Oh, you're not going to clap for them, huh? I don't blame you. We have many of our faculty, staff, and administrators here. We have my colleague in the sport management department, Dr. Cheryl Rohde, as well as many of our cabinet members here, and you'll meet a couple of our cabinet members a little bit later when I turn over the microphone. But we've got our Vice President of Marketing, Mark Cooper, here. We've got our Vice President of Student Development, Dr. Jamie Caridi. Our Vice President of Advancement, Doug Stein. And then we have a few other folks here from other avenues of our university. We've got our Career Services Center represented with Mandy Powell and Blair McLean. And we've got Michelle Hauk from our undergraduate admissions. She's our interim director of undergraduate admissions. And we also have one of our adjunct faculty members in addition to Danielle here as well, Greg Lott, who is wrapping up his PhD at Ohio State in sport management. As well as many of our current students. So I appreciate everybody coming to support our evening tonight, as well as all of their support for the sport management program here at Ohio Dominican University. As many of you know, we do have an undergraduate and graduate program in sport management. Sport management as an undergrad is one of our largest majors here on campus. We also have a couple of other minors that are ancillary to our undergraduate degree, including minors in sport communications as well as coaching. And we offer sport management as a minor as well. Our graduate program is in our second year of existence, and I would be remiss without thanking our fine graduate admissions department for not only working with our students to get them here to Ohio Dominican to share the experiences in the classroom, but also for putting on this fine event. Our director of graduate admissions is John Naughton. We've got Sarah Shumick, who's in charge of the sport management admissions process, as well as Riley Kirby, which I believe she is downstairs checking you all in. So please give a big round of applause for our graduate admissions office, because this event is because of their hard work. Just a little bit of about our master's program before we begin. Many people ask me, why get a master's in sport management? Well, the sport landscape has changed. Certainly if you look at the demographics and the workforce in our country, at one time, 50s, 60s, a high school degree was all that you needed to work in many fields. And then of course, as we started to shift, the bachelor's degree was required, and now it seems that the bachelor's degree is the equivalent of a high school degree 40, 50 years ago. What does a Master's of Science in Sport Management do for students? Well, it elevates you to a different level than other candidates. No question there are some positions out there, whether you want to work in college coaching, administration, high school athletics, where a master's degree may be preferred in the job applications. And certainly when we look at professional sports in other areas, a master's, an MBA, or some graduate degree is going to help advance in leadership. Our graduate program is a 39 credit hour graduate program. We offer our classes in the evening to help those that have full-time jobs. We teach our classes in 8-week segments. Our classes are offered both live and online, and we have 2 concentrations. So you take a sport management core, your sport law, your sport finance and econ, organizational behavior, human resources, the core that you would find at many sport management programs, but we add concentrations in 2 different areas. One is a leadership concentration, where our students would take 3 classes in our MBA program on negotiation, conflict management, change management, Or for those that are inclined in the science area, we offer a concentration in exercise science. That'll be on the books in the fall, where students have some background in science at the undergraduate level, but want to focus on perhaps personal training or other areas that involve exercise science. We're very grateful of the great connections and network that we've established in our program. Our board of advisors have been absolutely fantastic for us. The relationships we've been able to build, not only as a program, but certainly as a university, Ohio Dominican and the greater Columbus area. We've got great connections not only with our Greater Columbus Sport Commission, but all of our professional sport organizations, as well as the Ohio High School Athletic Association and many other sport agencies here in Columbus. So I encourage you, if you're looking at our Masters of Science program, feel free to shoot me an email, ask any questions that you have. I know that my business card is in the folder. So there is my pitch for the sponsor for tonight's program. Let's turn the floor over to Dr. Caridi. Dr. Caridi, again, is our Vice President of Development here at Ohio Dominican, and he is going to MC our program tonight. He's been a great friend and supporter of our sport management program. So without further ado, Dr. Caridi.
Thank you, Dr. Strode. Before I go any further, it's very important to point out how instrumental you are to this university. We have a sport management program that is second to none across this country. Dr. Strode spoke eloquently about the curricular aspects. He only spoke a little bit about the network of relationships that we've built as a university, and that's because of him. And if you have an opportunity, make sure you introduce yourself to some of the advisory board members this evening, but also take a look at the expanded advisory board when you have an opportunity. It truly is a who's who as far as sports goes in Ohio. So again, thanks, Dr. Strode. Linda, it is wonderful to have you here this evening. You are a dear friend to so many of us at the university, and we feel blessed that you are here with us tonight. Linda Shetina Logan, known by many as the mama bear of the sports tourism industry, has for 13 years been the founding executive director of the Greater Columbus Sports Commission since 2002. Now, in case you aren't aware, the Greater Columbus Sports Commission was created to attract professional, collegiate, amateur, and youth sporting events here to Columbus. The commission works with grassroots sports groups, local businesses, area colleges and universities like us here at Ohio Dominican, the government, and entities like professional sports teams as well, all with the purpose of bringing premier sports events here to Columbus. To share a bit more, I want to turn to a brief video on the Greater Columbus Sports Commission. Under Linda's leadership, Columbus has become home to marquee sporting events, generating millions and millions of dollars in visitor spending, national and international media. In fact, get this, Linda and her team have bid on and been responsible for bringing more than 350 new sporting events to Columbus. Events such as the 2015 NHL All-Star Game, or the upcoming 2018 NCAA Division I Women's Basketball Final Four. And let's not forget the 2017 NCAA Women's Elite Eight held here, right at Ohio Dominican University. These hundreds of events have generated more than $400 million to the local community. Simply astonishing. Now, prior to her role at the Sports Commission, Linda was the Director of Sports Marketing for the Greater Columbus Convention and Visitors Bureau, what you now know as Experience Columbus. She was also a Director of Sales and Services at the Greater Columbus Convention Center and has worked for the Kansas City Convention Center, the Big 8 Conference, the Kemper Arena, and sports teams in Kansas City, Milwaukee, and Cleveland. She has organized, staged, and directed literally hundreds of meetings, concerts, sporting events, and conventions. And this has even included presidential debates and the United Nations Summit on Trade. Her accolades include being named one of 5 2013 Women of Achievement by the Columbus YWCA. And she was recently recognized in Connect Sports Magazine's cover story, 9 Women Who've Got Game, for making significant contributions to the sports tourism industry. She is a native of Fairport Harbor, Ohio, is a graduate of Ohio University, and resides here in Columbus with her husband and Will. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in giving a very warm welcome to our friend and honored guest, Linda Shetina Logan. Well, Linda, thanks again for being here.
Sure.
Well, let's get started.
Okay.
So what's your story, girl?
Okay, we'll start.
We-
Well, I did realize that I was traipsing around in some soccer fields, so I should have polished my boots, but oh well.
Well, let's get started by, I gotta ask, how does this girl from Fairport Harbor, Ohio, population 3,097,
Oh, did it
how does this girl become the who's who of sports, not only here in Columbus, not only here in Ohio, but known throughout the nation? Where did the spark start?
Anybody here from Lake County? No. All right. Well, close enough. Fairport Harbor is 1 square mile, but I think there's a good lesson just for wherever we grow where you're planted. But at age 10, I fell in love with the Cleveland Indians, and it's been a love affair for many, many years, and a few good times and bad. But what was important, I think, back in my day was prior to Title IX, but I used to be the track statistician and wrote for the school newspaper, volunteered with the marching band, did a lot of things extracurricular, never even dreaming that there would be a career in sports. I'm 60 years old, so back in the day, we really didn't even know that those kind of jobs existed for women. I think very traditionally, my friends or mothers were homemakers for the most part, and maybe some moms were nurses or teachers, but I don't think I even had this in mind, but I just always did things I liked and had the opportunity to go to Ohio University. We actually had the very first sports management program in the United States, and was just surrounded by people that were part of that program, and really they gave me a chance to come back into that master's program. I was an undergraduate communications major in organizational communication. I don't think that I even realized what that meant at the time, other than I thought I was going to be a journalist and a sports writer, but I ended up not being such a great writer, and really just kind of went from there and got some great opportunities because of that.
So did you always know I'm leaning towards the sports field, or were there other interests you had?
I didn't know. I had a chance right out of college to work for the Cleveland Nets. It was World Team Tennis. It's a league that still exists in some form or fashion, but we had Maria Navratilova, Bjorn Borg back in the day, Dr. Renee Richards, which she was very controversial as well. But it was a seasonal job. So once the position ended, here I am, the first in my family to go off to college, and I get this great job in sports, but it was only for 6 months. I ended in October, and I was coming back in January, and my best friend had moved to Boulder, Colorado. So I moved there for 2 months. I'd never been west of the Mississippi, and started working at a Chinese restaurant. And my parents were like, what, we just paid for you just went to 4 years of college to wait tables in a Chinese restaurant? But I think it was part of the adventure. Came back, and the league and the team had folded. And so I worked for a bank for 1 year, and was a teller first. And I think I met somebody today that was a finance major. And I said, if you want a career in sports and you are good at finance, work in the box office. Because I learned so much as a bank teller then working in a box office that still helps me in the job that I do today with all my budgeting. So you just never know where that career path will take you. But then I had a chance to go back to Ohio University into this master's program. Had a chance to now do an internship in Milwaukee, Wisconsin with the Milwaukee Does. You get it, the Bucks and the Does. It was a precursor to the WNBA. Once again, the team in the league folded, so now I'm 0 for 2 for the teams in the league. So I thought maybe I should get something more steady and I moved to Kansas City and took a job at the Kemper Arena, which would be like our nationwide arena. And had a wonderful experience. Kansas City, I lived there for 10 years and worked for their arena. I worked for the Big 8 conference, which is now the Big 12. And then I worked for their convention center. And I was there for almost 7 years, and had a chance to move to Columbus and work at our convention center here, and really started bidding on events and understood that there was a kind of a missed opportunity in the marketplace, that there wasn't a sports commission here or a dedicated sports effort that some of the larger cities already had. So I politicked for many years to start a sports commission, not necessarily that it had to be me running that sports commission, but that the community needed that dedicated effort. We were just building these great new facilities, the Schottenstein Center, Nationwide Arena, Crew Stadium, and our convention center is really one of the busiest sports complexes, as well as what's going on in our colleges and universities. So really kind of a checkered past, if you will, but that's where it started.
Well, let's go back to the college years. We have a lot of prospective students and students with us tonight. When you were going through the process, what would you do differently? What were some of the most meaningful experiences during college that you felt were really important to the trajectory that set you on the path that landed you to so much success?
I don't know, maybe because I'm from a small town, but I didn't know a stranger, so my network over the years is very broad, and because I think I was very outgoing, first and foremost, and didn't know a stranger, but I was very good at keeping in touch. So if somebody got a new job, I would always write them a letter. So I think there were a lot of things I did right. I was able to develop really strong relationships, whether it was with the janitor or the CEO, I think, which is another great lesson for students to realize that as well. But anyway, I think what I didn't do is early in my career, I probably should have bought a house sooner. You know, I was a little bit of a vagabond moving from city to city. So maybe financially, I mean, I was probably well into my late 20s before I realized I should start being really smart about things like that. So something like that might be a simple lesson to kind of grow where you're planted. And even though I kept thinking, oh, I'm not going to stay here. So that was just more of a personal message. Yeah.
A lot of these students are discerning a degree in sport management. Tell us how a degree in sport management adds value, maybe sets you apart from somebody that may be doing perfectly well in another spectrum, another degree, another major, and wants to break into the sports field. How does a degree in sport management really give you a leg up?
You know, I think you have opportunities to learn sort of what's under the hood when you come into a program like this, where you are learning about research and why that's important to the bottom line of a team, perhaps, or you're learning a lot about writing budgets or marketing plans or strategic plans. I think those are things that probably you don't know when you are maybe heading down a different path. I'm also someone that believes that you can take your major and learn as you go as well. I mean, it's very important to get those opportunities that a university like ODU has, where while you're here, can you intern in the athletic department? Can you learn about concessions? Can you learn about parking? Can you learn about marketing and communication? So I think that what happens is when you have that entree, I think the university is more open, and the athletic department in particular is much more open to opening their books to their students and giving everybody that opportunity to learn with a hands-on approach.
So the sports business world has a number of opportunities. Lots of folks know about some of them, but there's also some hidden gems in there that students may not know about. Can you talk a little bit about the variety of opportunities in the sports industry, and maybe some that are really growing, good opportunities that may not be well known out there?
I'm, again, a firm believer that there are careers that, this darn necklace, sorry again. There are some great opportunities with our professional teams, no doubt about it, even those large athletic departments as well. But who knew that there was such a thing called sports tourism? What is a sports commission, for heaven's sakes? How many of you knew what a sports commission was before tonight? Just a handful of you. So really, a sports commission has what I think are 3 mandates, and why we are created, and why there's probably 300 cities around the country that go after sports tourism. First and foremost, it would be economic development or visitor spending. Anytime you can get someone to come to your city, play in a sporting event, they're going to leave behind dollars at the hotels, the restaurants, transportation, attractions, shopping. That's probably the biggest reason we were created. But then, especially in a community like Columbus, we are very big on raising the profile or the image of Columbus. We all know Columbus, we love Columbus, but if I was at a conference last week in Los Angeles, and I can't tell you how many times people said to me, "No, is that Columbus, Ohio? Is that Columbus, Georgia?" So we still struggle with that lack of image nationally. We have an NHL team here, you know, we have the All-Star game, we have some of the best events in the country here, but we still struggle with that lack of image. So anytime we can host the Women's Final Four or something like that, we're byline Columbus and we get more people to know about the community, that is very important. So that's our second mandate. And then number 3 is that quality of life, of doing good things for Columbus through sports. That could be as simple as we're going to have Carrie Walsh Jennings here in a few months, the famous Olympian that's in the sport of volleyball, and she's going to be helping us promote the Final Four of women's volleyball for the NCAA that will be here in December of 16. But as that quality of life piece, we hope to get her around to some of our schools, some of our clubs, you know, talking about her story, her message, and that's just maybe an inspirational part of that quality of life, that you can be around the best and brightest of a sport and understand what that might mean to you as a 10-year-old going to my first Cleveland Indians game and really changing that course of my life. So that's a piece of the quality of life. It could be as simple as before we built Nationwide Arena and the Schottenstein Center, you used to have to go to see an NCAA basketball tournament. You used to have to go to Cleveland or Cincinnati or Pittsburgh or Detroit. So that quality of life is, hey, we're a more vibrant community. We are hosting these marquee events. Or let's say Cardinal Health is trying to recruit some executives to move here, or the limited brands. And all of a sudden, they might not know that much about Columbus, but because of sports and because of the vibrancy of the community, that again adds to that quality of life piece for recruiters and for people that live here. Are there any of you that are from out of state and that had no idea that Columbus was the 15th largest city, that we had so many shopping opportunities or restaurants? I know my job is to sell the destination every day, but I truly believe it, and I think that we're a great, great city. And one of my friends was just talking about Portland and how great it is, and I said, well, when's the last time you were in Columbus? And they said, oh gosh, 15 years ago. I said, I love Portland. They've probably got more green and maybe light rail than we do, but I think we're just as cool. And so I think as a community, we don't always recognize and have those bragging rights about what a great community we are and that whole quality of life piece. So those are the 3 mandates of a sports commission day to day.
So, you know, as you share a little bit about the sports commission, you spoke a little bit about how a person in the sports industry doesn't just hang out with people in the sports industry all day long. They're working with politicians, they're working with civic agencies, they're working a lot with the corporate community. Maybe you can share a little bit about just what goes into getting major
Yes.
events to come to a town and how important it is to have those relationships.
I fancied myself as an operations events person back in the day and never knew I would be a politician. As much of my day is spent working with the mayor's office or the county commissioners, or just working with the hotel community or the restaurant community and their leadership and making sure that they understand the importance of bidding on an event. We started bidding on the NHL All-Star Game back in the year 2000. So it took us 15 years to get it. Now, were we going to eventually get it? Yes, because there's only 30 NHL cities, right? So the law of averages were in our favor. But we just didn't have the right hotel mix. We didn't have the number of suites that we needed. We have about 4,000 hotel rooms downtown Columbus. They only needed about 2,500, but what makes our package somewhat unique, and before we got the new Hilton that was just opened 2 years ago, some of our hotels, although quite lovely, like the Drury Inn downtown, the Red Roof Inn, those are all considered limited service properties. And what the NHL had said to us all those years ago, look, I can't say to the Boston Bruins, your team's going to be staying at the Hyatt, but the New York Islanders, you're going to stay at the Red Roof Inn. Even though it's a beautiful property, it was just the perception that it didn't have suites, it didn't have a restaurant, just their perception of those teams that wasn't an even playing field. So we really could not land the NHL until we built that new Hilton. So it took us years and years to tell that story. I think I've lived here for 25 years, and it took probably the first 20 for us to tell that story that we need another downtown hotel. And so anytime anybody would listen to me, in my colleagues, was that was a political position. We still had our day job. We were still going out there bidding on all kinds of things, but it took kind of the heavy lifting of hundreds of people to get that hotel built. And we've already seen the great successes that have occurred, not just in sports, but the vibrancy of the community because of that property. So that's one example of the politics. Or, for instance, the Women's Final Four. We had to raise almost $3 million to bid on the Women's Final Four. So that does not happen overnight, and that just does not happen with me, Linda Logan. I have to have an army of people that work together. So Gene Smith, the athletic director at Ohio State, Alex Fisher, the head of the Columbus Partnership, Brian Ellis, my board chairman, and the host of people in the corporate community had to come together, and we're already at 2.4 million. We had to guarantee the 3 million before we got the bid, but we're now only about $600,000 away from our goal and only have 3 years to go, but feel very confident that with those connections and all the things that are happening, those things kind of come into play in bidding on some of those marquee events.
You've been a pioneer as a woman in the sports industry, and you've had the opportunity to witness a lot of change when it comes to women in sports. I'd like it if you could share with us a little bit your perspective on women in sports, not only the athlete side, but also on the business side of sports.
So I feel like I didn't have boundaries that I think that I had to overcome to be a woman in sports, because I think that maybe my personality, I didn't understand maybe the challenges at first. Now, looking back, was there some unusual things that may have happened that could be construed as maybe sexual harassment now? I think I was from a generation that sort of the dirty jokes and sort of the all-male audiences sometimes probably were a little bit off color and probably wouldn't cut the mustard now. But I really had maybe some unusual things. I'll tell you a funny story. I just shared, last week I was at an event. It was the ESPN Women's Summit in California. There were about 300 women there. And it was a really a privilege to be there. It was an invitation-only conference. And Linda Logan was alphabetically with Carly Lloyd, so that was kind of a cool thing. But we shared the same hallway together. But anyway, I ran into Ann Myers Drysdale. So the senior citizens in the room, they might recognize that Ann Meyer back in the late 70s was probably one of the marquee athletes of her time. And I introduced myself to her and I said, "Oh, you won't remember me, but in 1979, I worked for the Milwaukee Does, and she, of course, was, on one of the teams as well. And we had a good laugh about the logo of the Milwaukee Does. So those of you that want to Google it now, it's probably the most inappropriate, most politically incorrect logo that you could ever see in America. And maybe that would be a great topic for one of your classes. It's this very shapely doe in hot pants and high heels and the eyelashes, and just the time really was, I think somebody has it here, you should pass it around, but anyway, can you really, so we just got a good laugh about how ridiculous,
they already have it up, Linda.
yeah, how ridiculous this logo was and how it would really not, make the cut nowadays, but I was really naive and young, and I was asked to go and pick up one of the league officials at the hotel in Milwaukee. So I got my little car and I drive there, and back then you didn't have a cell phone, so you call from the lobby, and he says, "Oh, I'm on a conference call, but come on up here to the suite, and this will be a great experience for you to be part of this conference call." So I go up the elevator and I knock on the door, and he opens the door wearing a towel. So I'm like,
gosh.
But he was on the phone. But it was just one of these crazy experiences, and I remember thinking, this just doesn't feel right. So I said, "I'll meet you back in the lobby." So I mean, things like that I think nowadays people would just be, outraged by some of the circumstances of things like that. But I think that I'm proud that women have an equal seat at the table now. Some say that maybe salary-wise, there's probably still a disparage, a difference in some of that. But I've never felt left out or that I didn't have an opportunity to grow and prosper, even though I was probably from a generation that was new to sport. Mm-hmm. So,
when I mentioned Linda being a pioneer, some of you would know that she started the Women's Sports Report here in Columbus, which is maybe in its 5th year. Am I close?
Yep.
and has had tremendous growth. Maybe you can speak a little bit about what you do
Sure.
with the Women's Sports Report.
So by day, our job is to bring these sporting events to the community, but we also need to raise dollars for our organization. We're a not-for-profit, and we do get some hotel tax through Experience Columbus, but a lot of our dollars come from the public or the corporate community. So I think early on we learned that we needed to friend raise. So we created an event called the Morning Sports Report. That's a town hall meeting of sorts, and it's really is kind of the place to be to hear a little bit about what's happening in the Columbus sports community. And that event probably has been around about 12 or 13 years now. But 5 years ago, I was at a Christmas party, and it was the same year that the Ohio State's field hockey team and their soccer team was going to the Final Four for the first time, and Otterbeин's soccer team was going to the Final Four for the first time in Division III. And I happened to mention that at this Christmas party, and one of the guests said, well, I guarantee that, Linda, you're probably the only person in this room that knows that. And it got me to thinking that really there was not a platform for the girls and women in Columbus to really have that opportunity to tell their story. So we put together a kind of a mini version of the Morning Sports Report, and I rented some space at one of the hotels, thinking that maybe it would seat 300, a room a little bit bigger than this. And we had to stop sales. That all of a sudden it got so popular that we had to close it down. And so 5 years later, that event now has 700 people. That's the one that Carrie Walsh will be a speaker at coming up in February. We do a parade of champions with all of our state champions from the 11 counties that make up the Columbus region. We actually have sponsors now. And we actually feel like it's very informative, and we recognize Coach Lindsay Warren from here was one of our panelists, 2 years ago when we were bidding on the Women's Final Four. We like to tell the stories of the people and the women that live here and do good work, and it's proved to be quite a wonderful, if I might say so myself, very special event. So I think those are the things that when you talk about Columbus and the opportunities there are in this kind of community to make a difference, I think that's what we've learned about being part of the Greater Columbus Sports Commission in a community like this.
Again, we're with a lot of students and prospective students tonight, and some of them are discerning first jobs, how to go about that. What are some of the mistakes you've seen made of new professionals in the field of sport management?
Well, if any of you have heard me speak before, I guess my favorite saying is that overnight success takes 20 years. And I say that because in this generation of everything needs to be right now, and I'm that way myself with my phone and my emails, and I expect that everything's going to happen quickly. I think you have to realize that you're going to get out of college and you're not going to get that dream job right away. And you're going to maybe take the road less traveled and not always go on a straight path. So I love to say, don't be afraid to learn about plumbing hookups or trash removal or working in a parking lot or something that might not be just sports. I had a chance to talk to Julie earlier. We got reconnected, and we talked a little bit about the fact that in the events business, you can work at the convention center, you can work at the fairgrounds, you can work in a hotel and learn the same skills that you can use if you ever got a job with the Blue Jackets or the Cleveland Browns or working in Ohio State. So, kind of grow where you're planted, be a reliable employee, ask a lot of questions, keep in touch with colleagues and people that you meet along the way. I get a lot of phone calls, as probably some of you do, to talk to students or somebody's niece or somebody's cousin about a career in sports, and I always give homework. And you would be surprised how few people follow up with the homework. So it's also that inquisitiveness and the fact that it is a heavy lifting kind of sport, a life. You can't be a slacker to work in sports. You're going to have long hours. You're going to work lots of weekends. Like I said, all hands on deck. Even though I'm the executive director, I hang banners, I pick up trash, I stay till midnight. So those are the things that I think if you are someone that likes to work hard and you're not a prima donna. I always say in the interviews with our staff, it used to be I did all the interviewing, but Now I don't as much, but I always say no divas work here because there's just not room for that in our business. I mean, I'm sure that people have that attitude sometimes, but I don't think you really will excel. You might be the rare exception that can have that kind of attitude, but that's just my personal philosophy.
Now, Linda, I'm going to ask you a few more questions, but I want our students and prospective students to get ready because you're going to have the opportunity as well in a few minutes to ask Linda some questions. So there's your heads up. You've had an opportunity to work with a tremendous number of very important people in the industry. Many well-known, some that are on our board of advisors. At Ohio Dominican, we talk about virtue, dignity, carrying yourself with a level of ethics, no matter what you do in life. Who are some of those people in the industry for you?
So I was asked this question a couple of months ago about who's my favorite athlete that I've ever worked with. And I didn't even hesitate, and I said Tommy Rowland. So if there's any wrestling fans in the crowd, Ohio State athlete, All-American, missed going to the Olympics 3 times, each time just by a heartbreaking millimeter. But probably one of the most, I don't know, it's hard to say he's got the it factor, but talking about all those things about character, hard work, someone that could be president of the United States someday. He's just somebody that, I don't know why his image still stays with me, of someone that just stands for all the right things that sports means to individuals like myself or to a community or to a team. So he is someone that if you're a wrestler or someone from Columbus, you would know of Tommy. You can Google him too, because he's an awesome guy. But now he's in the workforce and has a father of 4, and he's just a stellar person. So I think he really, to me, personifies what you want, all that's good in sport, because we get to see all kinds of crazy things and the things that make the tabloids and the headlines. So he is someone that just has stayed with me as just and I've gotten to meet a ton of people like that. I actually, because of my path, Bill Hancock is another. He is the head of the BCS now, the Bowl Championship Series. He was my boss back in the day in Kansas City with the Big 8 Conference, and he probably his claim to fame before the BCS was he headed up the NCAA basketball. He was the liaison with the NCAA men's basketball, but he is someone who lost his son to a plane crash a few years ago. His son was on that Oklahoma State basketball plane that went down 10 years ago now, and he's just a great family man. He's someone that just wrote a book, Following the Blue Moth, with Jim Nance, I think, did the foreword. So people like Bill that find a way to have that work-life balance that eludes some of us in this business, that he's been able to, be a great dad, a great father, a great husband, somebody great for his hometown of Hobart, Oklahoma. So he's somebody else that comes to mind.
Sounds pretty special.
Yep.
Who are some of the worst people? No, I'm joking.
I told you about the guy in the towel, right?
So you've had a number of our interns come through your office.
Yes.
Speak to the students and a little bit about the value of internships, getting their feet wet, and maybe the experience you've had with Ohio Dominican interns.
I got to be an intern, and I loved being an intern. So like I said, we used to be a staff of 1, and now we're a full-time staff of 12. So I used to be very involved with our interns, but I want to make sure that the interns can leave there feeling like they learned something and they weren't just free help, so to speak. We want you to learn more about than just stuffing envelopes. So I think just having that opportunity to have a good skill set when you leave and having a seat at the table. I know that we have some great staff members. I know Bruce Wimbish from our staff is a member of your advisory board here, and Bruce is a real leader, and he is very involved in the Black Sports Professionals, which is a networking educational group that really has not probably been out in the forefront like it could be nationally, but because of Bruce and the guidance that he does locally, I feel like we're able to connect people that once they might spend time with Columbus, we still might find ways to connect you when you leave. So again, it's talking about that good work ethic. If people are willing to come and be willing to roll up their sleeves and work hard, we'll make sure that it's worth their while when they're there.
Right. And if you have an opportunity to meet Bruce, he really is a wonderful guy. Your entire team, you have a staff of 12,
Right.
and somehow you have figured out how to hire all-stars.
I feel that way too.
So-
I mean, I get to be the person out front all the time, but behind, or with me, I should say, not behind me, but with me are some very talented people that I figure I'll be working for someday, right?
So my final question, Linda, before we get to the real hard ones from the audience, how do you keep balance in life? I know faith and family are very important to you. What advice do you have for us here about how you maintain balance between professional and personal in an industry that goes 24/7?
I don't think I think it's a sliding scale. I think sometimes I'm really good at work-life balance, and sometimes I'm terrible. And I think for me, my personal story is this. I got married at age 41. I have the best husband, but we were both in our 40s when we got married. And so for us, that worked. I think that I'm very fortunate because I'm really happy in my life and my marriage, and he's a very patient guy. And he has an unusual field. He's a video producer and a writer, so he has crazy hours as well. But I think both of us probably waited too long to have a family, so I would say that that's probably the one heartbreak personally. So any of you, especially I think women, we think, oh, we can do it all, and I think we are taught that we can do it all, but at times, if that is something you truly want to do, you have to probably, most of you are very, very young right now, but if that's something that is important to you, then you should give yourself a clock and say, okay, I think by a certain age, then I need to slow down. And I don't think my generation knew that. I think we were the first generation that were told that we could have a career and have a family. And I've been able to really, I'm the funnest aunt there is, of course. And I have so many young people in my life, nieces, nephews, neighbors, goddaughters, and all of that. So that's just a personal advice that I always like to say to people about balance, because it is one of those things that creeps up on you, I think.
And it's important because the industry could swallow you up
Oh, yes,
otherwise, right?
yes.
So- Well, it's your turn. And this is, I think you figured out an enormous opportunity to speak to somebody who has just about done it all in the area of sports management. And I can share from a first-person perspective, having had an opportunity to been in a variety of meetings with you, and there are other people in this room that will tell you that I have seen Linda in action. And when you walk into a room where Linda Shetina Logan is at, the corporate CEOs know her, the mayor knows her, the who's who of Columbus and the region know her, because she is somebody that gets big things done and does it in a virtuous, humble, respectable, and ethical way. And so it's an enormous opportunity for you. And so with that, we want to open the floor, and I think we're a small enough group
Yes, yes.
that you can just, if you wouldn't mind, speaking loudly so that everybody can hear you. Who wants to go first? Who has a question?
Any questions?
In the back?
First of all, thank you for coming out here. Appreciate it. But I really appreciate 2017. I am so looking forward to the Division II Elite 8 here at the university. I actually played here in 81,
That's great.
but I didn't finish, so I'm back in
Nice.
adult education.
Okay.
All right, round of applause there. All right.
Yay.
With that is, and getting it here, the work to get the Elite 8 here, I know it's Division II and not making a slide of it, I know it's not D1, but for us to have it and to be able to be a part of the alumni and part of Panther Nation, to see this happen is such a blessing for me, being that I was here.
We're going to put you to work. Okay.
Because I was here when we didn't have a gym and we used the mock road gym.
Oh, right.
So, for me to see that, but the work for you, I'm coming from Cleveland, Ohio, high school, public school system, and watching you, who I admire from a distance, the work, what did it take to seal that deal?
So the Elite 8 is going to be here in March of 2017. And what that is we had a chance about 3 years ago. It's hard to believe it's going to be happening again. But a few years ago, the NCAA decided to bundle all of their championships except for the Final Four, men's basketball and golf and baseball. So 83 championships bundled together, Division 1, 2, and 3, into one bidding cycle. And if you our main role is to bring events here. So it used to be the NCAA wrestling committee would send out their bids, and their NCAA fencing committee, and the NCAA golf, or not golf, but gosh, they all came separately, a la carte. You never knew when they're coming, so you just really couldn't plan accordingly. So you were getting them all times of the year. So they decided to put together all the bids at one time period. And what doesn't kill you makes you strong the first time. So we got together with our staff, Ohio State in particular, because they were going to bid on most of them, talked to Ohio Dominican, went to Ohio Wesleyan, and in the end, we identified that we could bid on the Elite Eight for just 2 of those years, because the other 2 years were over Easter, which at a Catholic college wouldn't really be the smart thing to do. So what the NCAA does like is they want you to bid on men's basketball and the women's Final Four and the Frozen Four and wrestling, but they don't just want you bidding on the big events. They want you to really bid on all divisions. So we felt that because it was really, Ohio Dominican, is this year about your 5th year being NCAA?
Right.
Because if you recall, Ohio Dominican was an NAIA school for many years. So it was finally a time to say, okay, we're Division II here, and this is a great opportunity. We had a consultant, Michelle Perry, that worked with us that was very instrumental in us kind of putting our plan together, our strategy. And we ended up bidding on 30 events. So 30 bids had to be done separately, but we customized them, and we got to talk to the staff here, and Jeff and Jamie and the whole team. We came together and had to put different maps together. We were selling 3 different distinct parts of the city. Downtown, and those events that were going to be at Nationwide Arena for our bids. Then it was anything on Ohio State's campus, so we had to have separate maps of that. And then, of course, here. So we customized maps, storytelling, facts. We had to work with all of our hotels, and sometime that might be an interesting session just to show you one of our bids and what they look like. But it was hundreds or thousands of hours of doing that. So on December 13th, 2013 was the decision date. And the NCAA, the way that they rolled out the championships, they did web podcasts on each sport. So we had 10 people in our office all ready and listening and logging on to see, because we didn't know what events we were getting. But we ended up getting 9 events. So we were the second most in the United States. I think Kansas City got 11. So it was that strategy of working together and just telling this wonderful story of this great university that helped us. And believe it or not, the bids are coming back already, and the bidding cycle starts again in February through August of next year for 2019, 2020, 21, and 22. So we deal in futures. So we'll have to decide before we host if we want to bid again.
If we want to bid again.
Right. Those are the crazy things that we do in our life.
So we have to assume we're going to have a great
Yes,
experience.
that's what I mean.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Other questions?
Hey, Lou.
So the first full-time job application or interview process can obviously be very daunting. I just wanted to know, what advice do you have for students applying to work in the professional sport industry or sports?
This is what I personally look at. I'll look at, have they volunteered? Have they, even if you're an usher at the Palace Theater, that's sort of event related. So I love the fact that I see, and many of you, I think, of your generation do so much more volunteering than we ever did. So I look for people that have kind of that practical experience. I mean, I think classroom work is very important, but I don't think I've ever been asked my GPA. I don't mean to be slackers about students. sorry. But so I just think that practical experience goes a long way. And so just think about that wherever you can volunteer, and whether you sell program ads for the football team or a PA announcer or whatever that might be.
And Linda, in this industry, who you know matters, right? So the value of internships is very
I
important.
think,
isn't it?
yes. But I also think that I'm a perfect example. My father will always say, well, she didn't really know anyone in the business. But I think because I was relentless and I just volunteered all the time, it does make you, I think, a little braver. So yes, I think the answer is both.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Other questions? We'll go over here and then we'll get
Okay.
you next.
As a college football player, I would like to know when I'm applying for a job and the employer looks at my resume and sees that I in fact played 4 years of college football, what kind of an impact does that have on employers when you see that this person applying for a job, they in fact played 4 years of college football, 4 years of any college sport?
You know, interesting. Ernst & Young just did an amazing survey, and this, I'll come back to football, but this had to do with women in sports first, and they found that most women executives that are in the CEO or the C-suite, I think like 85% of them played college athletics.
Wow.
So I think that translates to what you're saying is, I think it means commitment, you know, the fact that for 4 years you can play a tough sport, you know, that takes a lot of work-life balance, what you learn as a team member, and I think those are all things that translate very well into the workforce. I think that I was not an athlete, so my siblings can imitate me running. So I was what you call a mental jock in a way. So I never was a member of an athletic team, but I do see that there's some strengths that are very important. And I also think it's important to have life outside of football too. So what makes you, like, what are your hobbies? Like, what are things that make you tick other than that too, so that it shows you maybe a little bit more well-rounded. So all of a sudden you might have that on your resume, but you wrote for the school newspaper. Or, I don't know, that you might not have time for that. So I think I also would say, well, he was a football player for 4 years, so I shouldn't expect that he's going to be having 6 or 7 other affiliations too. So.
Question over here?
Hi, my name is Alex Amos. I'm in the MBA program here. My question is, what career opportunities have you seen for MBA grad students in schools?
You know, again, I like the MBA students because I feel like undergrad, you're just, you've got to learn so many other things about life, and, you know, can you be a business major and then get your MBA in sports? Or, I think that's a great route. Either way, but I think that it shows, again, the commitment, the fact that you are, you know, going to that next level, and you know, the book work gets harder, the commitment gets stronger, and so to me, that shows, again, that commitment and being able to leave there with understanding the business community and sort of the ins and outs of that. That's going to take you a long way, not just in sports, but with any company. So.
I think we have time for one more question.
Hi. What have you learned outside of the sports world that you've like applied to your job, either through a book or somebody else, but something that you're proud of?
I love, one of the best jobs I ever had was as an event coordinator at the Kansas City Convention Center. And because of that, I got to work not just sports. I mean, sports was just a small piece of that, but I got to work with the best and the brightest of whatever industry that was. It might have been a religious convention, but because of that deacon or that minister that was running it that was so charismatic, or I got to work the FFA, the Future Farmers of America. That was my group for 6 years, and I was committed to it was funny, I'm not from a farm community, but when I left that job and moved to Columbus, they gave me my honorary FFA degree within the ag circles is a really big deal. So I found that anytime people want to volunteer in their industry, they're committed, they're passionate. You know, I've gotten to just meet CEOs and janitors that have impacted an event. You know, there's times when you have to get them both to work together. So I find that it doesn't even have to be sports related, but those lessons learned in the crisis are also, you kind of find out what people's mettle is or what they're made of. And so I just, I think it's just the respect of learning anything new from someone that is passionate about what they do. So, anyway.
Well, Linda, if there's a burning question out there, I think Linda's going to be around for a few minutes
yes,
afterwards that you can make sure you ask her it. Before you go, Linda, we do want to make a special presentation, and here to do that is Doug Stein, our Vice President of Development and Advancement.
Stay right there, Linda. I'm going to take this photo opportunity, take this room by control.
Do I get to stand
Is
up?
this on? No,
Oh,
not yet.
Not yet.
So where's Dr. Strode? He's right there. One of the things that Dr. Strode and I collaborated on when I got here, he took me under his wing, and we've been collaborating for the past 3 weeks now on a guest lecture award. And now you are the lucky recipient of the Ohio Dominican University guest lecture presentation, and it matches.
Oh, my outfit.
That was not orchestrated.
Oh, Shetina, thank you, thank you.
Now, I want one student in the audience to orchestrate a photo op, because I'm going to put you on display and have you show Linda your stuff. So I'll take one volunteer to orchestrate the photo op with the banner. So go ahead.
Oh, this is like the Apprentice. All right, come on.
Anybody?
And please, one more very loud round of applause for our distinguished guest of honor, Linda Shetina Logan.